Hey, good morning. Well, it's morning now. I don't know when you're watching this video, but hello, my name's Thomas Nyback. This is 365 Days Towards Racial Change, and we are in the um, home stretch here. So I'm pressing because of my life situations. I got to knock out big blocks of these videos. We're here talking about being black in America to some degree. I don't know. I'm not delivering an exhaustive view on the black experience. I'm only one person, but I've got experiences. We reference, I think, some great material and resources to explain the black experience. You know, we mix in current events. You'll hear me rant. Um, you can agree, disagree. The comments are open. Just don't be too outrageous. And I'm glad to share ideas here. Um, so we'll get right to it. I'm doing a bunch of these, and I'm going to redo one. If you're up to it, you can go back and find day 199. That got deleted. I'm not going to go into a big thing about. There was nothing wrong with it. Just Google was a little oversensitive. So if you've been watching the sequences and you notice day 199 is missing, you can go back and find that. Um, I want to get to that right after this. So, Black in America. We've talked about a lot of things. Um, for some reason, I like to riff, just free flow for the first 10 or so minutes. And for some reason, I'm thinking about celebrations and holidays and how Black people just don't have their own custom. Not Black Americans, those descended from slaves like me. What we have, there's no tradition, there's no celebration, right? If you look at the Muslims, you look at the Jews, they have, you know, they have celebrations, that's connected with their history and all that. Black people just don't have that. Not really. Not MLK is not what I'm talking about. Compare MLK Day with something like Yom Kippur or um, Ramadan. That doesn't compare at all. It doesn't equate. It's not. Um, this again is a celebration. MLK is something deliberated on by white folks, and it's all diluted into community and inclusion and all that stuff, and it's watered down. And Black people don't have their own celebratory space, right? And I think that's important. I mean, you look at holidays, religious holidays and stuff. Those are very specific celebratory spaces, um, where when you hear them, you associate that with a certain kind of community on the earth, right? You know, the Black Americans. Oh, we're just the fifth wheel, the odd person in all the endeavors. And I lived that myself personally. I was always the guy hanging around stuff, you know, never my own identity. And to a certain degree, Black folks have that issue as well. Black Americans, Black people descended from slaves. And it's you gotta appreciate that, ponder that before you resist some of the things I'm saying. You know, you think about, I don't know, various holidays, celebrations, and you know that they're associated with a certain community, with certain people's history, right? You know, we I don't know where Kwanzaa's at. You know, Kwanzaa came out, and it really, um, I guess it has some tractions in some places and communities. I've never celebrated it in my home. We always have a white Christmas when it comes to that time of year. Um, Easter, Easter is all right, but it's not really. It's the Christian. There's an inclusive community. I'm for that. I have my religious leanings and relationships with deities, Christ, and things like that. Um, one thing that would put black people unified on the map is a holiday, and we don't have one. I'm not pushing for one. You know, if I was going to have a holiday, I would call it no holiday, and then I bet you people come running. There's no holiday day, right? You say Cinco de Mayo, right? May 5th, and then you got parades, there's flags, there's a language, there's a food with that, right? You know um, what community on the planet is associated with Cinco de Mayo and stuff. I don't know, this thing's wrapping up, and what do you know? I didn't spark any grand social movement from what I'm saying, but I'm thankful for the feedback I get. I'm friends with some of the people that watch this, and I really appreciate, love you all a whole bunch. So we're just going to get right into it today. I've been tending to ramble and going over. I like to keep it in the 30-minute range, so I won't talk about the white folks mentality, black folk mentality today anyway. Specifically, I usually have those um, elements ready and ready to go. Now, I'm inspired to do this work by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. He informs us about a lot of this stuff, and we reference his work heavily. And we're going to get back into it today. If you have any of his books, we are in Black Labor, White Wealth. First book I read of his was A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask, Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice, and Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com, here on YouTube, easy to find here on the internet. Behind me, you see the hashtag #US2 symbol. We find black women having their community, conversing and supporting one another. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a black Facebook experience. If you've got an entrepreneurial mind, go check out Dr. Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School, theblackbusinessschool.com, for your entrepreneurial needs. And a very open-minded guy. He's got a lot of products, and I give him a shout out because he's giving me free trials and things like that. For your taxes, maybe startup, understanding what's going on in the world. A guy named Tyrone Gregory, self-employed tax guy, and you can find him on LinkedIn, um, and then Facebook. He's got Twitter account. He's not hard to find either. I've talked with him on the phone. Speaking of money and economics, if you really want to get your hands on some juicy alternatives and understand how America is working, how its finances are working, especially in this time with stimulus, you know, qualitative easing, if you understand some of those terms, that's important. Also, take time if you're interested in American money, read up on the Federal Reserve and get. I'm not an expert. I'm not able to articulate, but it's interesting the amount of power we give that bank in a sense. Did you know it's not a federal? It's not controlled by the government, and it is its own entity inside the United States operating, but it's very powerful. So get anything you can get. There's some very small, tiny books on the Federal Reserve and what they're allowed to do and how they cross the line. I encourage you to read some of that stuff. In a couple days, we'll get back to Uncle Tom's Cabin. I decided to crack that book open and just relive some of the things going on in there. Today, we're in Black Labor, White Wealth. If you have the book, we're page 117. Today is day 336. I've been with you for over 330 times. Thank you for hanging out. Wealth production in the Americas. And this is a little going back to some history and the origin of racism, actually. Racism. This is one thing that attracted me to Dr. Anderson was, he said about racism, he says, first, black people cannot be racist. Now, here's why. It's because your racism is the term, it came from the 1400s, where the Europeans are mastering sailing, the Portuguese, Spanish, English, French, anybody that had access to the Atlantic Ocean, shipbuilding, the technology was viable enough so you could really take the voyages to reach the New World. Well, they did. They found all this virgin land with pockets of savages, really Native Americans, in the land. Not an organized modern society there, and they had all this potential free labor out of Africa ready to go, and that started the race to get all this stuff organized and controlled and packaged and stuff like that. That's where our racism comes from. Today we're talking about the Spanish-Portuguese element to that and kind of what happened. They were the group that really, coming from Dr. Anderson's work here, exploited the transportation of slaves, goods around. If you know your little, even elementary school history, the Golden Triangle, which was Africa to the Caribbean, up to the Americas, and then there was like a big circuit, and the Atlantic Ocean circulates that way, clockwise. If you're looking at our map, the Atlantic Ocean has a natural current that goes clockwise on the planet, and the ships did that. Like, a ship that wanted to go from Europe to America, back then anyway, it would actually take a more southerly route, follow the major currents, and then come back up north as it approached land again. So the Spanish, we're talking about Spanish and Portuguese, mostly Spanish today, but they had a great thing going with those trade routes, getting a hold of new land in the Americas. They stayed mostly southern, which is kind of appropriate. We got Canada, French up north, English in the Americas here, kind of in the middle of North America. And then the southern part of North America is a Spanish culture, and actually all the way down to the southern tip of South America. So the Spanish, and the Caribbean islands and things like that. So the Spanish, they took care of your southern area of the Western Hemisphere, and they made a massive profits with sugar, tobacco, precious metals, vinegar, rum, molasses, um, a lot of these crude raw materials. Well, they had a great shipping company and good system for all that. Now up in the north where the colonies were, and for um, England and maybe northern Europe areas, that they did have their own system going. They wanted to control trade and resources coming out of the colonies and stuff like that. So that did happen. But if you look at your map and you wonder why from Mexico on down is um, it's a Spanish, heavy Spanish influence. That's the reason Spain, took care of that southern area. Now, Spain also used to have firm control over Florida, but it was loosely. They claimed it, but they didn't manage it. If you remember some of our discussions way back about Andrew Jackson's incursions in there, met little resistance, captured black folks, free and escaped slaves, and took them back up north into slavery. Um, and some of that stuff went on, but because the Spain was recognized as having control of Florida, but they did not enforce it. They did not advocate for the black people who were legal citizens there as well. So anyway, you have the Spanish with a good commerce, good economics going on there, big machine, this labor and transporting labor to land, you know. They get the slaves, and this is something I haven't researched, but it'd be interesting to know how much African collusion was involved with uh, getting those slaves on the ships. Did they tell them a good story? Did they know they were confined? Because I guess, slavery, I'm guessing was an issue for Africans since time immemorial. You find it in the Bible, you find history of darker people or serving lighter skinned people. Um, but I wonder how many free thinking Africans got wrapped up and just drafted into that um, a life of coercion and brutality and violence, you know, versus how many were already conditioned as to be servants somewhere. Where was it as simple for some people just say get on that boat, go with them, or is it how much of it was like say the first hour or so of Roots, where Kunta Kinte is a free-thinking African who is just out one day wandering and wanders into a band of white um, poachers, or I don't know what you call them, and he gets captured and brought here, and boom, Alex Haley has 2 giant volumes on his story about his experience and going back to Africa and connecting with his ancestors. So you just wonder about that. Anyway, these slaves, you get a good slave. Now, here's the interesting thing. So you get these slaves, the Caribbean is not, you're not as far as coming all the way to North America. A lot of these ships took the slaves to the Caribbean first. So that's why our Caribbean lands, you know, Jamaica and all these Haiti is French, was French controlled, but we may talk about that in a moment. Um, but very darker people there, and they got this shipload of Africans. Well, these Africans, they could go up to $500 a piece, and Dr. Anderson, some expert, has done some math. Man named Howard Zinn done some math. Estimate $500 for a um, a slave. Multiply that times millions, and the adjusted gross revenue is phenomenal. That's just for the slave trade. Now that's $500. Now let's think in the States. Now that these slaves come to the Caribbean, maybe they're educated on language, dress, they're looked after medically, because the slave industry wanted these slaves to be healthy, to present, to get higher prices in other market. It's profit. You want profit, profit. Same thing with livestock. Your cows, you don't take a sickly, worm-eating cow to market and expect to get top dollar. So slaves are probably conditioned to accept some rudimentary commands, understand um, how to serve white people or people in power, and then they're ready to take up. Maybe they've experienced the last, been beaten a little bit, to understand that power. Yeah, I was in the military, and it's the same idea for basic training, right? You get in there 8 weeks, and you get the drill sergeant, and that's a man or woman who was just, you fear, and they're higher rank. You're young and stupid and new and afraid and things like that, and you don't know stuff. And the drill sergeant is for that 8 weeks, it's like God on earth, right? So you can expect some of the people like that in those ranks to indoctrinate, educate these slaves for service to um, to white people or people in power. Millions, millions of slaves, $500 a piece, trillions of dollars today adjusted of revenue, and that's just in the slave alone. But forget about if the slave, if the slave is going to be worked. Let's just say the slave is going to work to death. That's going to be it. That's their space and their role, and you're getting whatever life expectancy, however many seasons you can get out of that labor is going to be just that much more profit. And in at the peak of slavery in the United States, a slave went in the market from upwards from between $1,500 to $1,800. So it's marked up at this 300%. We're talking, and then getting the work, getting reproduction from the slave as well, male and female. So you're talking about a lot of profit, a lot of profit. It's so sad that we can't get a good reparations argument going for the slaves. For the slaves, and this was this is probably global. You find indigenous people not really up to ready to work. Huh? So this hot, humid, deep south of the United States, people can't handle that. You need some natural, right, sunscreen. for that in this portion of Black Legal White Wealth, and considering Spain and Portugal. And Spain actually kind of pushed Portugal aside. Portugal was not much of a competitor for long. Um, but when it came, once they started mining, we've noted Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil mostly here. Um, the natives that they found that tried to press into service couldn't handle it, right? So, yeah, the strong black folks, they pushed them into that kind of service. So blacks replaced them. We did the work up north, all around the world. That heavy lifting was ascribed to us. Just we were with a machine you could just abuse and abuse, and we just keep right on humming. I mean, but that had to be so fascinating, so such a privilege to coerce, beat, torture, rape your um, your servants, and they still find a way. Don't get me started. Uh, in exchange, which blacks, of course, got nothing, but this race that was happening, it enabled Europe to refill its coffers, get ready for the next war. Because what the timing of this is interesting, because Dr. Anderson tells us that this race broke out kind of as all of Europe was suffering from disease, a lot of wars, right? Just and well, I don't know why, but it seemed like, why is war so necessary, right? And so people, they had their little wars ongoing, and they owed each other money and stuff like that, and they, Europe had really exhausted its resources. So when the Western Hemisphere was discovered, yeah, so through that, the Europeans, you know, replenished their supplies, their coffers, and everything, and you had this whole thing running again. Now, pay attention, because you and I probably will not be here, but when we perfect our space travel, you know, um, whatever resources we find on Mars, and as we reach out, I know a lot of people have their eyes on the moon Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Titan is full of natural resources that you can use for combustion, and some interesting things. On the moon is like one big gas station, right? And if we ever got the technology and ability to harvest some of the things on our outer planets, the Jovians, there you're going to have a resurgence of this cycle going on. I won't be here in the flesh to see that, but it's interesting to think about. Spain pushes Portugal out the way and really takes over. But you've got some Portuguese um, in South America. I don't know which countries exactly, but there's some Portuguese down there. And there's other dialects of Spanish all through there. Let me finish with this. My little personal thing. I learned Spanish, and I think I've talked about this, so I won't belabor it. We're almost out of time. But I learned the Spanish language, and they're throwing all this stuff about vacations and travel and privilege at me and stuff. And I'm trying to learn this language, but I'm really getting offended by their indoctrination into Spanish culture. So I made complaints, and I told them, well, they ask for feedback, and on my last thing, I passed Spanish. That was a big roadblock for me getting my degree in philosophy. And I love Spanish. I like the language. It's made me think about some things. But at the end, I was like, it's very racist the way you taught Spanish. You make it as though, one, America has nothing to offer, and you challenge, you offend me in all this privileged lifestyle that I can't really contemplate and grasp yet. So, Spanish, great pride, never dealt with slavery, obviously. They gave my folks a ride, probably, over here. Um, but it was real insensitive the way they presented themselves. That's a little bit, you know, the history is probably easy to find. You can find it on the internet, but those are just some talking points, some discussions. Leave a comment if you like, and I'll see you soon. My name's Tom Liznaiback. That's day 336 out of the way, 365 days towards racial change. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.